Swinburne University of Technology.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. I'll be really quick because we've only got an hour. What we're aiming to cover today is firstly a few examples, and some of you have seen our work before, so you know the sort of thing that we do, but also just give us sort of a term, something to refer to when we continue on and try to develop some of your ideas. So the first 20 minutes I'll show you through some of our demos. The second 20 minutes we'll look at one of your ideas from in the group and work through that together. And the last 20 minutes, hopefully, we'll get together in smaller groups and work on your own individual ideas. The aim of today is for you guys to walk away with sort of a clear roadmap of, okay, I've got an idea for a game and here's what I'm going to do to make it. Okay, we're not going to talk much about technology because it doesn't really come into it. You don't need to know a lot about technology. It's more about the same sort of things that you use as teachers. It's narrative, it's logic, it's things like that. Here's the first example. This was for Victoria University. It's to teach sustainable demolitions, obviously, how to do demolition sustainably and safely. It was funded by the NBN when it existed and gave out money. This is targeting young school leavers, so sort of 16 to 18-year-olds. This is probably one of the most game-like games that we make because of that sort of target audience. When we've surveyed that audience, all of them are gamers. So we include these little things like customization and whatnot because they enjoy those things. I'll just give you a really quick look at the game. Yes, I chose male first. No, just one. Yeah, so I chose male and then went into the male section. Strangely enough though, probably 2 out of 100 people using it have been female. But we did get abused the first year because we didn't have any female characters. So we try to include game assets like the Holden Ute you can see there. With the idea being that the kids, you know, if they do well, they get to drive around in the ute and things like that. And the idea of this sort of game is to wrap up very sort of boring content.
My name's Ted, I'm the boss. If you know what you're doing and do what I say, we'll get along just fine.
So the scenario is you're a new worker, he takes you through some situations, you have to make decisions on how to demolish a roof or find some hazards on a workplace. Based on that, at the end of the game, he'll sack you, promote you, you can be charged with industrial manslaughter, there's a sort of a range of options. The idea of this game is really to learn by failing, which you don't get to let kids do. I'm sorry, I should have hooked up a mouse here. You know, you can't put kids in a really unsafe workplace and let them do really unsafe things. So I'll just zoom through. I won't stay in this game for too long, I'll just get up to one of the first questions. And that's the uses of serious games and simulations are usually to teach things which are too dangerous in the real world, logistically impossible, or just too expensive to do. And a lot of that learning at the moment is just done by books. This is what happens, this is how you do it. Games give students the opportunity to go into environments and actually make mistakes and destroy things and have a more holistic approach to their learning rather than being told this is how you do it.
Okay, now follow me.
So this game's made using the Unity 3D engine, so this is a games engine game. What using a games engine means for you guys is it's generally going to take a few people to make the game, so it's quite a large team. And I wouldn't say not excessively large, but you need at least sort of 3, 4, 5 people to pull off a game in one of these bits of software. You're going to need graphic designers, you're going to need script writers, you're going to need programmers, you're going to need all these different people. So I can just put on my safety gear just to show you. That might be a very good time to jump out. Oh, here we go. So, something's going wrong. We'll jump out now. So those games, and we've done one for the white card game as well, are freely available and they're used by sort of RTOs all around Australia because they were government funded to start with. Now I'll be really, really quick because we want to get onto your ideas. This is Pharmatopia and this is really good just because of the model that they've used. This is made by Monash School of Pharmacy, which is very independent. I'll just click on one demo, but it's a modular approach, so there's a whole bunch of different laboratories that you can go into and do exercises. A lot of them are just machines. All of them are very specifically targeted. So one of them is to teach students the relationship between the ingredients in a pill and the properties of a pill. And one of them is to teach them the compound dispensary one, which I'll go into, is to teach the maths and the equations behind a compound dispensary, which is basically a pharmacy that's down the bottom of a hospital and mixes up creams and things like that. I'll let that load for a little bit. Let's go. We'll jump in here. There we go. So this actually started off in Second Life a long time ago. I think it was 6 or 7 years ago now, as this big island that you could go around to all these labs, and it's now got really fine-tuned, whereas all these things can be embedded within learning management systems and things like that. I'll just give you a rough idea. This is just really learning maths, and again, it's about putting the maths in context for a pharmacist. So there's over 100 different equations or things that have to, problems in here. You get presented with a prescription, then you pretty much, and I won't take you through this because I just get everything wrong and it's awful and frustrating. And you have to select your ingredient, and you have to select how much of the ingredient you weigh it up, you do all those sorts of things. Yeah, I won't even bother looking. But you can zoom along, you've got your scales is the next section, and then actually packaging it up and doing your prescriptions the final thing. Now, the good thing, just going back to Pharmatopia, the beauty of Pharmatopia is when they started it, they only had a few modules that they wanted at Monash. They invited everybody else, all the other schools of pharmacy from around the world on board, as well as multinationals. So CSL have contributed to 2 of the modules, GSK has contributed to 3 of the modules, and different universities from around the world are always just adding their own modules in, and it benefits all of them together really. Obviously they try not to deal with any local competition, but everybody else they collaborate with. This is another quick Monash project, just out of interest. We're actually doing a more up-to-date version of this. This is quite like Siri, where you can actually type in anything and get a response. Now I can ask what medications you take. And I can even ask her sister what medication she takes. Now, the real issue with this is getting enough data to make these bots smart. The pharmacy side, this is for interprofessional learning between pharmacists and doctors. The pharmacy side of things is going quite well because pharmacists have a little bit of spare time. The doctors have no spare time at all, so we've had real trouble training the bots and getting them smart enough. I think we're up to about 88% accuracy at the moment, which means generally 88% of the time you'll get a response. But we get the odd student, and especially in those courses you get a lot of younger foreign students who have a very different take on English than we might. So yeah, it takes a lot of time just to go through all those different ways of asking the same question basically. And that's been quite an interesting thing. So future versions of this kind of thing that we're doing, we're looking more at more scenario sort of built things where there are a limited amount of options for questions and answers, and they're leading you down different paths, but it's still gamified. Hopefully I can present that to you next time I'm here. Now, I don't want to keep talking about that stuff for too much longer. So what I was interested in doing today was exploring some of the ideas that you guys might have, and particularly if we could take one of those ideas and just workshop it a little bit as a group and show you guys, okay, here's how you get it up and running. It won't necessarily cost money. We might even find during the process there's already a solution out there, ultimately. So I wondered, does anybody in this room have a really clear, or not a really clear, but some sort of idea of a sort of game that they'd like to make for their course? Any volunteers? I was hoping for a few.
A lot of them that I've done a sort of very rudimentary ways, a sort of a tragedy of the commons game where you have this one lake and you have about 4 fisheries there, and they've only got a limited number of fish, and so if they over harvest the lake, then all 4 of them go out of business. So I've been doing a sort of very rudimentary simulation to sort of
Okay.
Using a spreadsheet. But
Is this for what, corporate responsibility or something like that?
Critical thinking in management.
Okay. Well, let's put that up as the first idea. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other ideas? Or we're running with the lake? All right, so we'll run with the lake idea, and then we'll just take it through as a group. Oh, sorry, one more idea, was there?
Oh, just to throw another one out, it's
Yep.
off the top of my head, really. I teach in tourism and management. We do something similar. So perhaps I think the tragedy of the commons could be good in the management side of things. But for tourism, I thought it would be interesting to do some sort of sustainable tourism development. So whether it's an island or an attraction, maybe an island where you can do amenities, attractions, activities.
Yep.
You can look at the economic, environmental, and social aspects.
Is there enough common ground between those two ideas to join them together for our discussion? Yeah. If it was rather than a lake, or if it can still be a lake, but I guess four different tourism venues all coming and sucking up all the business.
Yeah.
Does that sound reasonable, or you're going to have to contribute, or we're just going to go down the wrong path and you're all coming with me?
That's all right.
Does that make sense as an idea for both of you? And then we can develop it sort of from both perspectives. Okay. So the first thing is, who are your students? Who is the target audience, and what exactly is the learning outcome? And I guess it's like a film, you can have a grand film like The Godfather or something, but the overriding theme of The Godfather is succession. It's all about succession, do you know what I mean? And that's what a good game, you'll have one overriding theme, one very clear thing, like this teaches you the relationship between the chemicals in a tablet and the properties of a tablet, something very dead straight like that. So.
I guess, for me, the purpose of the game is to really emphasise, I guess to I suppose have a sustainable business. It's not just down to their individual actions. They've got to actually sort of coordinate with other people, other teams to actually make sure that it's sustainable.
Okay, so how would you phrase that? Could you phrase that in one sentence? It's to teach.
Sustainable business management.
Yep. So to teach sustainable business management. Yep. That's the short version. Okay. Did you have anything to add to that? And sorry if I can ask names, but we're going to be out of here soon.
Perhaps you could talk about something about the understanding the links between various stakeholders or something like that, and how the interdependence that exists. Or something like
Okay, and that fits into what you're talking about exactly, doesn't it? All right, brilliant. Who are your students? What age are they generally? Who are you talking about? Sort of undergraduates, graduates?
Pretty much first years.
First years? Okay, so it's very 18-year-olds, usually quite savvy gamers these days, all on the mobiles, all those sorts of things. So we can assume quite a bit from the audience as well, because say if we were doing a nursing demo, I might say, who's your audience? 45-year-old, people being retrained or something like that. Brilliant.
18 to, sorry?
I don't know, Tim, what do you think? 18 to 22 maybe?
Yeah, probably around about that range, I think. Yeah.
But there's always a few outliers as well, so that if you mature age,
Yep.
Yeah.
of the mix, which we can't forget about.
Sorry, what was the
Okay.
18 to...
That's important to notice though.
Yeah.
So we can't leave them out, obviously. It has to be accessible to everybody. Yep. Okay, what are the big issues with teaching this subject at the moment? Just pure boredom? Or... Oh, no, sorry.
I think making it relevant to real life as well.
Okay, so putting it into context.
Putting it into context, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, so that leads to the next question. What do you think that your students would respond better to, sort of the video training or the game style? And we're doing everything really, really quickly here. Usually we'd be researching, we'd be seeing what's out there, we'd be doing all sorts of stuff. But game style? Yeah, game more than video. What makes you say that? Just...
They have the attention span of a retarded gnat. They really don't have the same students. They don't like doing any work where they have to do it. So little rewards, bit by bit, just like in games.
Okay, brilliant. Fantastic. All right, ideal. Would a mobile game work, do you think? Or are you looking at something that's more online? And do you need to track the progress of the students?
I guess for this particular one, probably something that could actually be done in class, but I could actually envisage them doing it on laptops, especially if they're having to make decisions, because previously the way they've been running the game is that they would come up to the front of the class and say how much fishing that they were going to do on a given term.
Yep.
So they could actually do that through their laptops and get little graphs and things like that afterwards and everything. Yeah, quite good.
Okay, perfect. All right. So visually, what do you think this game would look like? And you've already started. So it's a lake, is it? And you can kind of click on any of the 4 piers to go fishing at the original one, is it? Or-
Yeah.
Is it multiplayer? So are there multiple people fishing around this lake at once?
Yeah, four different fisheries.
Yeah. And they're all real people within the
They're
classroom.
all real people, yeah. I mean, each represented, by a group.
Yep. So does it turn into just a competition? Who can outfish the other ones?
Well, yeah, it sort of does actually, but that's when they realise at the end of the game that the point wasn't actually competition. That the point was sustainability. When the lake has totally run out of fish and that they can't actually continue to the next turn.
Okay, perfect. Well, I love the idea of the hospitality thing in this as well, because we can leave the fish in there. Like, we can still have too many tourists outfish the lake, can't we?
Yeah.
We can add in other things like adding new rooms, and maybe one hotel comes in and adds another 100 rooms, it depletes all the other ones in the region, things like that. So it can be quite a complicated sort of simulator. What role would you want the students to play? So are they playing the manager of this hotel, or if we say they're going to be hotels, 4 hotels?
Mine was totally off the cuff, so I don't know. But my idea would be more of a different stakeholders, like community members, the developers, environmental groups, and all various stakeholders, rather than purely a hotel, like a hospital, more of a tourism perspective, I guess, than just purely a hospitality version. But
Okay.
as I said, my idea, I just came off the top of my head as we sat here, so I don't know, it might be better going with what.
No, that's a really interesting addition, perhaps.
Yeah. So in the simulation that I ran, the groups they were supposed to be the CEOs of these fisheries companies.
Yep.
So they could. So basically, the decision that they had to make each round was how many fish to actually harvest, and played the game under a couple of different conditions. One where they weren't allowed to talk to each other and that they could just see the results of the fishing, and another condition where they actually were allowed to communicate and say, well, hey, the lake's being depleted, we really need to, bring down the number of fish that we're harvesting
Okay.
every turn.
And they were talking to each other in person in the classroom, were they?
They were, yeah.
So that's an interesting angle, I suppose, to be able to bring your other stakeholders in. If you're doing a bit of a role play, you can go, okay, you're the fisheries manager, go talk to these 4 hotel owners and try to sort this out, just so they can sort of see those scenarios as well. So if you're talking about, and do you think that classroom exercise is really important, or that they could do it all online themselves?
I reckon it probably could be done online. I guess especially with some graphics to show the visually the depletion of the lake and the profits of other companies and that kind of thing. And I mean, probably if you actually had it online, you could probably make it a little bit more complex as well.
In terms of a competition and people making money and driving each other out of business and whatnot.
Exactly.
Would they have to be online at the same time though? Would that be a potential issue?
They probably would be unless you made it turn-based.
Yeah, okay. All right. So far we've just worked through a whole bunch of ideas. We're starting to get a picture of what our game's going to be about. The user is going to log in. They're going to play, we'll say initially they'll play the role of the CEO, though I think there's room for definitely other stakeholders, but we'll just try to keep it a little bit simpler for now. The CEO of one of 4 hotels. Another 3 people are logging in. They're the other CEOs of the hotels. What happens next? Yes.
As the number of fish goes down, your price is going to go up for the fish. So you're going to actually create kind of direct competition.
And then you're getting less tourists to the area and things like that.
Yeah, so you can sort of balance it through that kind of interaction.
Okay, so I guess, essentially the game will be about the users making decisions on what they do. Do they collaborate at all during that decision making? Are they meant to be talking to each other, going, I'm going to add another 100 rooms? Because otherwise, I guess what's to stop everybody from going in and just going, okay, Taj Mahal? Because, yeah, that's what kids will do. How can we stop that from happening, and what process can we lead them, to learn sustainable development rather than just going in and wrecking everything and going, yeah, I did it wrong and I crashed the car? Because they're not going to learn too much from that, are they?
Could you have iterations of the game where you let them do that first time around, show them what happens when it runs full course under that model, and then introduce some mediator into it that actually says, okay, well, let's now try and collaborate in some way to not allow that to happen again. Sort of thing. So have it, have it be, each round might be quite short. It might show a life cycle of the hotel going through growth and then decline as it,
Yep.
does its thing. But then be able to rerun it with a different parameter involved.
Okay.
Someone maybe comes in and talks to everyone, or maybe there's some government policy that comes in to limit the amount of growth that can happen, or I don't know, something like that.
All right, that's a fantastic idea. That's really brilliant.
Capital. Just limit the capital.
Okay.
Investment, and then they can only build so.
Perfect. So they all start off with a set amount of money. Here's what you've just bought a rundown hotel in this area.
Yeah.
Here's what you've got to spend on doing it up. What are you going to do? Yeah. I mean, are you going to buy fishing boats? Are you going to buy, or are you going to install more rooms? And I think they're two, simple measures we could use. Yeah.
I think you talked about the policymakers coming in, but regulators as well. We're talking about the tourism idea. So where you have the community also represented, so advocacy groups might lobby against this happening in their environment. So it could make it more complex. So they the sorts of things you're throwing.
Are the locals still able to go out and catch fish, or
Yeah,
your big
so-
four companies are fished out the lake, so the local
Draining
community is affected? Are the tourists not coming anymore because they can't, go fishing and catch the big fish they wanted to? They can't go snorkeling or diving and see any fish. So there's lots.
Yeah.
All right. I love this. Now it's getting simple. I think it's getting to the point where we can simplify things. So you're coming into the game. You're playing one of 4 hotel owners, and there's 4 different people in the game. You've got a certain amount of money to spend. You get to spend that money basically, and we'll keep it simple for now. You can choose how many rooms you're going to add or how many fishing boats you're going to buy. Then everybody gets to do that. So all 4 hotel owners get to do that. And then we move to, 12 months later. And 12 months later, you're getting feedback from all those stakeholders that you were talking about. So the fisheries guy's coming in going, you're mental, why has this guy who owns the Hilton on the West Bank just bought 50 fishing boats? We don't have that many boats here. So then would that be useful? And then you can actually stand there and you'd have all these different stakeholders giving all their different opinions, and that's almost the result for that stage. And then again, because it's iterative, they get to start again and try a different scenario and run that and get the feedback from the different stakeholders as well. Would that sort of thing work? Because then you could talk about, Mario over here built too many hotel rooms, he put you all out of business. This guy got too many boats, and you could add all sorts of different things. You could have cafes, restaurants, all the different things that hotels have within them. All right, so do you mind if I finish that for a sec?
Yeah.
So our opening screen, and I'm terrible at drawing, but so are probably most of you, so it's not so bad. Our opening screen can just be a big lake, 3-dimensional, gamified, and this is sort of where I'd throw in a bit of game in razzmatazz with your 4 hotels. You can see, potentially, you can see what the other hotels are doing and what other people are doing. Would that be helpful? Yeah, I guess what they're building during a certain process. And perhaps it's a time limit. You've got sort of 5, okay, log on at this time, you've got 5 minutes, do whatever development you need to. Now let's see how that affects you 1 year down the line. So they jump in, they can click on their hotel, and this is where we've already discussed what we're going to do, and we could do it all just by pop-ups and numbers. How many rooms do you want to add? How many fishing boats would you like to buy? Things like that. But the idea would be to sort of gamify the experience to the point where, again, please excuse my pictures, you had some boats out the front, you had the hotel, you can click on the hotel and add rooms and it's automatically adding rooms. You can click on the boats out the front and add boats, and boats get added. You can click to add a cafe here and a restaurant here and things like that. And as you're clicking, as somebody mentioned, your money's going down. So you've only got a certain amount of money to spend. Once it's all spent, okay, we go into that 12-month trading period, and we could call that the financial year, really. Part of that, the results could be, here's how much money you made or lost during that year, but also here's all this other feedback from all these other stakeholders. Fisheries guy not happy, tourism guys aren't happy, you're just destroying it, you've killed all the fish and there's too many rooms and no one's coming here anymore, things like that. Locals aren't happy, there's too much traffic. You've been in construction all year, things like that. How does that sound to everybody? All right, it's a logical game, hopefully it'll come out, and this is just a 20-minute workshop, so obviously it's not going to be the ultimate solution. This sort of thing, and the beauty of it is it's quite modular, so you're doing one situation over and over and over again, and also all these 4 hotels can be exactly the same. So the kids go in, you just give them a different name, that'll be enough. But they all start with the same ramshackle shell of whatever, and you make up a story about the lake and it used to be a something something and now tourism's coming to the area and all that sort of business. So all you're really having to build in terms of 3D models is this overall landscape, a motel or a hotel with additional sort of modules that can be added onto it, perhaps a boat, and then you just duplicate the boat when anybody's choosing anything, and other little features just to liven it all up. There'd be trees and clouds and stuff like that.
But then in terms of bonifying it, like in terms of making it not look like work, what of all the decision points, which of them being found to work best? So turn-based or concurrent or all the various options. So it's kind of like the more immediate, like the addiction effect from Civ or something like that.
Yep.
So if you're trying to get that kind of addiction effect, and so it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
Where's the best ways to build that in for the range of objectives that we have to get?
To me, it's all just about, it's not really any deliberate building in, it's just about making every little step as entertaining as it can possibly be. And then it won't end up being a game for those people, which is really hard to say. And some of our stuff, like all of this stuff, to me is really, and I've played them all a million times, so I'm not the best judge, but they're really, really boring for me. But if we give this business one, like we showed some of the business students, that they were thrilled. The pharmacy stuff in particular is, I've got students that just squeal when they find out what medication smells on. And I'm just like, oh. So it's in the eye of the beholder as well, which I know is a big cop-out, a huge cop-out. But I think if you can make it relevant, like the guys that are doing those courses, they're really into business and they're really into running a business and they're into how they can make money and learning how they can make money. So I think if you can make a good game that really taps into that, and doesn't condescend and lets them do it in their own way and lets them absolutely go, all right, this turn I'm just going to try to send everybody bankrupt and see what happens. And it might be everybody at the table tries that at once and we'll see what happens. And to go, next turn, all right, now I'm going to try to do a good job. I think that's the value of gamification, is just that freedom to fail is what turns it into a game, rather than just going, you must get it right to proceed, you must get it right to proceed sort of thing. Bad answer, I know.
What would probably help is having some sort of progress metrics or something like that as well. So whether it's a social, environmental and economic, and able to see how they perform under each of those categories.
Absolutely.
Badges or rewards for certain achievements. I think that's what makes it addictive, when you can see that, all right, yes, if I get this, I get up to this next stage, or I've got this to do really well in these areas, but we need to do something there. I think just as I played a couple of games myself, not for a while, but they were the things that you would be sort of addicted to, if you like, is wanting to see the progress in those different areas. Yeah, well, there's your own score and then there's your score compared to others. And I think this seems to tap into your score compared to others quite strongly. So you could have leader ladders, who's made the most money. And the interesting thing about this is I know there's a game called Hotel Tycoon. And if we looked around, we'd probably find some very similar things as well. But people want to be hotel tycoons. They get to own more hotels, start up in more areas, expand, things like that, if you want to go down that line. All right. So I guess the original idea was that everybody would sort of chat about ideas that they had amongst themselves, but there doesn't seem to be too many ideas in the group. Is that fair enough?
Does everyone actually have a particular, not a problem, but something, a need for their unit that they would like to, perhaps, gaming might help in terms of meeting that need?
Got a couple? Haven't you?
I have a question. I have a game that's being done in Unity at the moment, and it's hopefully a week or two away from a beta version.
Oh, cool.
But my question is kind of looking at what you've produced up there, because I've been lucky enough to have a small grant actually from Learning Transformations, and also lucky enough to find some very good student programmers who are perhaps a bit cheaper, but
yep.
You have a trade-off of kind of money and so in terms of what you do and in terms of what you've shown us, what kind of budgets?
Okay, that's a really good question.
If I had $5 grand or 10 grand or 20 grand or 50 grand,
yep.
Because presumably there's some bottom point where you just
yep.
There's no.
That's really good to know, because that's one of the most relevant things. Our base point, and the best one for me to show you for that is probably that sort of the Pharmatopia type stuff, is around 15,000 in development. That's for sort of a simple room with a simple scenario that you're going through, up to the white card or the sustainable demolitions one, which I showed you, which is a bigger world where you drive around and do things. I think the funding was around 45,000. Some of the bigger ones, like the Pharmatopia now, all up has been sort of hundreds of thousands, but each new module is now down to sort of 15,000 because they're just a single room and a very single scenario. That's an important thing when it comes to, is it sustainable to make this? We're talking about sustainable business. Is it actually sustainable to make this? Is it worth it per student? Or is there a way of making it worth it per student? Which with the Pharmatopia stuff, they, by inviting everybody else on board, they made it worthwhile. I'll log into another one of those just so we can give you a look. Ultimately, that situation that we just talked about, which is again, it's a very similar situation to the tableting. It's an iterative scenario where you go through, at the end you get your results and told here's what happened, then you've got to go through it again. Hopefully, eventually you're making the right decisions through that learning. I can show you this quickly. Okay, so this one is just the relationship between the ingredients. And again, this is kind of like, in this version, we'd just be choosing, okay, how many rooms would you like to add? How many boats would you like to buy? How much would you like to spend on maintenance or, parklands or whatever, else came into it? And all of those things that you're buying are then attached to outcomes. So if you buy a parkland, the community leader might be really happy. Oh, you've been a great corporate citizen this year and you built a park for everybody, and I love you guys. Whereas, if you decide to not put in the new sewage treatment plant, the community leader might be angry at you. So this is all about just going through and using these machines and understanding, okay, if you've chosen these ingredients, this is the result that you're going to get. And in this situation, the machines can't be used by students ever because they're in sterile environments. They're usually running 24/7. Each batch is worth kind of $1 million and things like that. So it's a very practical use of sort of the technology. And then they go through and they test and they get the result. Lovely music. And this actually raises quite an interesting point for the, this hotel simulation we were talking about. At the start of this simulation, you get told, here's what we want you to make. Here's the tablet that we want you to make. So it's not always the same. Some tablets are better if they're soft or hard or dissolve quicker or slower or things like that. With the hotels, you could do the same thing. You could be, all right, your objective in this game is to go in and make as much money as you can this year. Or your objective is to stay cool with everybody and run a sustainable business for 10 years. Or your objective is to cash out after 3 years. And depending on that objective, obviously it's going to affect what you do, isn't it? You might make different decisions differently. So that's a good example of sort of, $15,000, $20,000. I think this would be about around the same, just going off the amount of models that we have. And it's not, like I said, it'll be one big scene. The hotels, the idea would be that you can click on your hotel, the camera sort of zooms in, so it's very three-dimensional and then stays on your hotel. As you're clicking on things within the hotel, the camera's zooming away and showing that new apartments are being added to the side, or zooming down and showing a new cafe popping up there and things like that. But you only have to build one of them and you can use it 4 times over. Then it's down to you guys script writing. Okay, here are the options for here's how much money you get. Here are the options for how I can spend money. Here are all of the consequences of all of those different options. And that would just be a huge spreadsheet. And then that's the game, basically, is how it would work out.
For the development of something like that, would you normally, if someone gave you an activity that would be an in-class activity, would you actually go away and actually come back with a proposal and say that's what we could do with this? Or do you always have like a workshop before and consult with?
We usually have quite a few workshops. We'd have workshops with you first, then we'd even try to go into the classes and see how it's taught. We'd try to get every single perspective. Because a lot of the jobs we get, one example is we do refugee health training for the refugee nurses, and they contacted us and we sat around with all the board members basically, and they said, yep, we're going to make an app and it's going to be awesome, and all of our carers are going to go out to people's houses and help them on the spot, and you need a doctor who speaks Urdu and they're going to be able to find it. And we're like, oh, well, hang on, we just want to find out a little bit more about this. So we went out and it turns out that they don't actually go to anybody's house. They sit behind desks with computers that they use. And it was just, the app was never going to work, basically. And it took us going out and just learning about what's going on down on the ground to go, okay, no, you don't need any of that. All we recommended for them was basic video training for all their existing workers, because none of them were being trained properly, because they, all the refugees get let out all in one day, and then all of a sudden they have to hire 200 carers to look after them, and most of them are backpackers, don't even know a health system, and it's a disastrous area. So sometimes our recommendation at the end of the day is, no, don't do this fancy thing. All you need is training. Like, all you need is a training book, and it's got nothing to do with us. Or, so that's funny. But it's all about, sort of understanding the technologies as well, I guess, and not getting too carried away with technologies a lot of the time. Which we've got some along the side here as well, which I should have mentioned right at the start. But if any of you haven't tried the Oculus Rift, that's really worth a look, because it's new and cool and different. Again, nobody's really found any really useful uses for it yet, I don't think. So that'll be interesting as it comes out. There's a lot of cool demos on it, but in terms of education, I haven't seen anything useful.
So one university, I think it was Yale, they're doing a virtual tour of the campus and taking it to feeding schools.
Yeah.
So they can take it to and show year 12s, and they say like 10 minutes each, or 7 minutes each, and they could get to supplement the promotion of the university.
Yeah, I question a lot of that stuff, to be honest, but I could debate it all night. But Monash actually has a really similar cave. It's like a $2 million big thing, big room surrounded by screens. The cool thing about the Oculus is it knocks that off completely. Like, the Oculus can do what that $2 million room gets. And it costs $10,000 a day, I think, to hire, if you want to get it off them. It's really cool for data visualization and things like that. So hopefully that's where the Oculus will end up. I think especially big data and things like that makes sense, but people are still working through how it can be used.
In terms of take-up, when we're thinking about games and introducing them into Swinburne units, there's a lot of questions that comes down to whether you incorporate it into assessment or make it an optional activity. What have you found from those games?
Ours kind of alternate between either learning tools or assessment tools. A lot of our stuff is learning, and we try to drive towards learning, and it's usually a bit easier to do that. Just because I think games do lend themselves to that iterative approach and letting people fail rather than saying, okay, go through this and get 100% right the first time. That said, a few of our things are used for assessment, and they're all sort of SCORM compliant and everything like that, so it's easy enough just to spit results to a learning management system. Most of this stuff can be embedded within a learning management system, so it's not really any different than a YouTube video or something like that in terms of how you go with it. But it just depends on what your desired outcomes are. The one thing we try to do is never mix them, because that's when it gets really confusing for the students and the teachers, and we made that mistake a lot at the start.
These simulators ever been used in the context of employee recruitment? Because I mean, I know a lot of companies spend a lot of money on cognitive ability tests and role plays and things like that to work out who would be a good candidate. I'm wondering if the simulators have been used in that context as well. Yeah, well, the scariest example I saw last week was made by the US Army, and it was for recruiting and training drone operators. And it was aimed at, because it was part of a competition, they fill out a form, and their target age was 15 and up. So it was very much Ender's Game. And in this game, it starts off literally, Abdul, quick, let's go. And they run away and the building blows up, and then it's your job to hunt down Abdul. And that was, and so you're basically flying the drone, and you've got to find it. They tell you he's in a yellow van, and you're looking at a van going, is that yellow? Oh, bugger it, I'll just choose it. And it's a really, so that's a really horrible example of what you were talking about. But across the board, I think there's much better ways of doing it, but the Army's really big on that these days. And most of the money for, like the internet, but most of the money for simulation and serious games is coming from the Army. And in particular, when you think about flight simulators, that's just a huge, huge industry. That was, I think, there's a company, CAE, that 70% of the world's pilots train on their flight simulators, and it's been like that since the 70s. And that same company does training simulators for the troops that got Bin Laden and all sorts of weird stuff. So they're training on all those scenarios, all that Iraq stuff and everything, they're training before they go in. Sadly, if you want to look at the cutting edge stuff, you look at what the military's doing at the moment. And then health is probably next. There's some cool stuff happening in health for the same reason. You can't cut up bodies all day, every day. And I guess it's the nature of the people that are associated with those industries as well. You need people who are quite adventurous and quite innovative and quite experimental.
So we've had a lot of fun with the pharmacists in particular, because pharmacy is quite a very innovative industry. I think it's the average drug costs $1 billion or something to develop, and they might not even go to market. So they're very into throwing money at research and expecting something back eventually, which is kind of how a lot of innovative technologies can work, you know, as opposed to just expecting everything to work perfectly all the time. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit. I hope I'm answering the questions.
A lot of these ideas are around obviously construction and you know, industry-based learning and pharmaceutical and medicine. What if we're kind of looking at other disciplines like English or maths or
Yep.
accounting or journalism? You know, have you seen any good models out there in those?
A bit of everything, really. Yeah. I'd say like maths and things like that are really easy, because you've got a question, you've got an answer, and there's some way to tie it all together. I'm not saying I've seen too many good maths games, but it's quite straightforward. That's what we were doing, and a lot of those things are just maths. It's learning the maths of things and putting it into context. So it depends on what sort of maths you were talking about, but I'm just trying to think of an example. You could do something really cool, you know, when you were teaching sine waves or something, you could look at something in nature which has sine waves in it, and you could use that, and you could be modifying the waves and writing equations which modify real waves in the ocean or something like that. I'm not that good at maths. The other, sorry, what was the other side of things? English and things like that. So one thing we're doing at the moment is sort of a scenario builder, which it's basically conversation, just like we were doing with the patients there, but it also checks, it's for training GPs how to speak to Aboriginal patients. So it also goes into a lot of context and a lot of cultural awareness. And each question that you choose, so you choose out of 4 questions, they give you an answer. Each question you choose is either a procedural question, as in what should you be asking next, and did you get it in the right order, or it's in this case, we're calling it a cultural sensitivity question, where you've got 4 versions of the same question that you can ask in different ways, and just making sure that people do ask things in the right ways, especially for that, like for the Aboriginal patients, there's kind of all these different rules attached, so it's all about learning that. And that sort of thing could be used for everything from customer service, for very low level customer service, all the way up to GP training. So and there's lots of mixtures of everything that I've spoken about with that as well. So there's quite a bit of stuff out there. A lot of the English stuff I see tends to be quite airy-fairy in terms of the virtual world stuff. Like big universes that you can explore and walk around, then write a story about or something like that. But it'd be interesting to learn more and to chat to you more about it, because I think there's a lot of potential in that area. All right.
Obviously with simulation, which seems to be the core of a lot of these games, you're taking something that's very theoretical and putting it into a practical context, so that you're helping students bridge that gap that they're learning. Is there any kind of evidence or sort of comparative studies showing the benefits of...
Isn't that your area? Yes, there is. As you know, there's emerging evidence. There is emerging evidence, and I can sort of refer people to papers and things like that if you need. One of the real issues with this technology is, though, that the research process doesn't keep up with it. So by the time we've published a paper on what we're doing, and it's released in a journal or something, we've moved on. We're way beyond that. And we've had that happen constantly. We've got a few papers, but by the time they're published, they're obsolete. And anybody reading them is really getting the wrong idea. We've moved on, come and chat to us. So there's a funny thing going on with technology and research where, I'm not qualified to speak about it, to be honest. But especially in these sorts of virtual world and, things like the Oculus and everything like that. And you guys know how research works as well. It depends on who's giving the funding and what result they want and stuff like that. And there'll be just as many virtual worlds are the most contentious issue. There's just as many studies going, they're absolute rubbish and don't use them, as there are going, they're the best thing you've ever seen and everybody should be using them.
So. I guess that was the next question that I had. How do you go about researching? What should actually go into a virtual world? Because I guess a simulator is only as good as its content and the assumptions that you make about the real world.
I guess in this example, we'd ask you to come back to us with reference images. So you've probably got a vision in your head. I'm sure you've already made this lake. It's probably based on a lake you grew up at or something like that. We run with your vision. And then, yeah, same for all the models. What would you like the cafe to look at? What would you like? What sort of boats will they have on this lake? What's all those little things, and then trying to pull it together. But with a lot of them, it's hard to describe. It's kind of like being a movie director, where you've just got to imagine it in your head before it exists and get all the pieces together and put it in. And yeah, obviously my drawings are terrible, so they're not really helping much. Yeah.
The work that I'm doing at the minute, your question about how do you research, it's kind of ethnography meets gaming. So it's
Okay.
working with social sciences to engage with the industry or the student group or whoever you want to work with to find out what works for them. So what you were saying at the start about are these people gamers and knowing whether they like to deal with an avatar or not, those kind of things, the questions that you would research probably.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, we call what we do, it's a service design process. So we start off, the first stage is just discovery, which is going around talking to all the various stakeholders, researching everything we can, finding all the other games that exist, even testing those with the students. And then the second stage is definition, which is when we actually write up the scoping document, call it whatever you want, business requirements document, functional specification document, whatever people ask for really is whatever we call it, but we write the same stuff. And that's when we're actually sitting down with the client and going, okay, here's all the things that we've learned. Your users don't have mobile phones, or here are the percentages, things like that. So here's our suggested approach. And then we go from there. And then it's sort of, that's your signing off on that. Before anything's even done, we've kind of researched and designed the whole game pretty much. And there will be a lot of changes made within the process, but the whole game should ultimately be designed before you've even, asked a programmer in or done anything like that. Yeah, and programmers, they're pretty awful people to deal with a lot of the time as well. They know their way of doing things and things like that. So it's a good idea for you guys to really crystallise, okay, here's what I want out of it before you go to anyone like that, us or anybody else.
So Dave, can you tell everyone about your team? I mean, I've met a few people from Oztron, but can you tell us who you have that will help in the project? Yeah, well, we're loose fit, and I don't want to do too much of a sales pitch, but it will describe what you guys need to have as well. So I've got a full-time producer, Paul, who's a little bit older. He's more of a writer. So he does a lot of the script writing, script editing, dealing with people. And then we've got 3 programmers and really just 2 3D designers at the moment. And between that, we get everything done. The other thing I'd recommend is if you are hiring programmers or 3D designers or anyone like that, get 2 of everything. Because the 2 will bounce off each other and you'll get a much, much, much better result. And it's just basic business, isn't it? But you will get a far better result from 2 programmers than you will from 1. Because very few, especially young programmers and young 3D designers, very few of them are well-rounded and know everything. It's a really complex area, and very few of them are going to be instructional designers and come up with all those other ideas that you want to hear about as well. So I'd say always just get 2 of everything and give them half each, and they'll come up with a better result for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Has it been helpful? Can I ask questions?
Of all the games you've made, which ones have you been given feedback that the students found most effective?
Probably in the direct feedback, probably the White Card, our OH&S game. And the reason for that is in Melbourne, or in Victoria especially, OH&S is 8 hours of death by PowerPoint. So it was more a case of comparing it to what they used to do. And we're not replacing 8 hours by PowerPoint, but we are giving them a break during the day. We also went into that with a lot of very sceptical teachers, really old tradies and stuff who aren't into technology at all. And we won them over as well, which was, to me, the most positive thing. They came out of it seeing it as a really valuable teaching tool, whereas they went in seeing it as a threat. So that's probably the most positive overall. The White Card game. So that was the one that came before the Sustainable Demolitions game I showed you at the start, was the next iteration of that. But the White Card game was, just workplace health and safety, really. And it's just such a boring topic, but it is really, really relevant. Like when you work with all the OH&S people, you go in, they're like, oh, did you hear a guy died today? And that's the world they live in. They take every little death on a work site or something really, really personally. So For me, it's a really boring industry, really boring, but for them it was good. The tableting stuff, I think the pharmacy students are sort of so high tech and so up to date with that sort of stuff, I think they barely notice it. It's just part of their schooling, and it's nothing special. It's just, oh, we've got to go here and do that now. Because they're going from, you know, even all the rooms in there and the labs that they get taught in and things like that, they're all quite high tech. So they tend to just to take it for granted. It's just another thing that they do, which is cool too. It has absolutely blended into their learning, just to the point where it works. So.
The other question is, say for that kind of outline, and perhaps even to try to reduce costs, which bit's the hard bit, which bit's the bottleneck? Like, is it the algorithms in terms of the levers to the outcomes, or is it? No, I'd say the hardest bit, I would say, and that's because that's the job I do, is the management and the production and the overall pulling everything together and making sure everybody's on the same page. And the teamwork involved with that. In terms of the individual skills though, the programming, like the modeling's really easy, you can see that. So it's just a case of how good you get it done. You can get a student to do probably a really bad version of it, or you can get someone good to do a really good version of it. Yeah, the programming in there is going to be quite simple. So it's more about, I suppose, having, if you guys understand the programming that's going to be required, you can go through and write up all your own spreadsheets, then take it to a program and go, here's what we need to happen. Here are the 3D models. Here's how it works. If somebody clicks here, I want this to happen. And everything can be basically within a spreadsheet, and you can hand it over and have it done. A lot of my job is just putting together those spreadsheets, to be perfectly honest, and imagining the different little bits that can come in and fit together. But individually, there is nothing difficult at all, I'd say. Other than, yeah, just like I said, with the programmers and the not so much 3D designers, they tend to be pretty honest and straightforward. But yeah, the most difficult bit, I would say, for a non-techie person would be not getting screwed over by the programmers. Straight up, yeah, and getting what you want out of them for the right budget. Yeah.
Is there a potential for a bit of a rose-coloured glasses effect after a while with games, where at the moment it's sort of all new and fresh and interesting and all, and approaching this learning in such a new way, but then over a couple of years that will sort of fade?
Yep.
Do you think games will have to improve as that effect wears off, or do you think there's something inherently attractive about this whole style of learning?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if games are going to improve or if education's just going to decline. But yeah, we saw that with virtual worlds in a really big way. Like when I started a lot of this stuff in Second Life, which some of you may know. And when it came out, everybody was just, wow, whiz bang, this is the first thing. You can go in there, you can do anything. There have been very few practical things for education ever produced out of Second Life, and I think Swinburne's still got its presence there, but hasn't been paying for it for a few years. Yes. Same as Monash, same as Vic Uni, same as everybody we've worked with. We haven't been paying for years, but they just leave it up because it exists. So that was an example of a really overhyped technology. That's my worry with the Oculus as well, is that, yeah, it's cool and it's whiz bang, and you put it on and you go, wow, I'm on it. Like, and if you haven't looked at it, it is really cool. But what are the applications for it? What's it really going to be useful for? You know, looking around a 3D engine.
So I read a really interesting paper actually on this one, the fact that every time you move your eyes, it actually refocuses just slightly, and then most people end up being actually using it for an hour or two. Like you can't physically keep looking using
at this version.
Yeah, and that's a real problem. But they're literally going to have to look at redesigning the whole system as to how they track your eyes and, you know, refocus how you read through all the images based on your eye location, not just.
And they may never get there.
Yeah, it's like they've got actually really big problems they haven't actually solved yet in the Oculus Rift. It's just sort of like an elephant in the room. But it looks cool still while you just temporarily use it.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I read something that's sort of quite different to that apparently a guy is going to try and live for a month, but 30 days in the virtual world. He wants to try and live free in the virtual world for 30 days. If he can't last an hour, I'm not sure how he's going to go.
Jeez. You'd almost rewire your brain, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It's got to be very sick.
It's the same. We've got a leap motion here as well, which, if people have seen, is sort of a hand motion gestures kind of thing, which is quite simple. It just plugs into any computer. again, it's at a very rudimentary stage and it sounds like a great idea, but then as soon as you get it and you just try to control your desktop with it, you realise, no, this is a terrible, terrible idea. I actually don't have control of my fingers in three-dimensional space, or I'd be a mad guitarist. Yeah, so you only learn by using them a lot of the time.
It's a big guy that put the two together in data visualization and then you would the Oculus Rift, and so it's kind of a bit Minority Report where you kind of exploring through your data with your hand but with your Oculus Rift on.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done a nursing demo with the same, so you can just go up, at the minute you can just turn a light on and off just as a demo, because we didn't want to give them anything for free. But it's not that practical, do you know what I mean? Like if you want to practice picking up an IV tubes don't cost that much. Just buy all the students an IV tube. If you want to practice them plunging it into something, that probably doesn't cost that much either. Let them practice in that way. The process is actually really, what we've done a IV tube application simulation, which is really useful for learning the process. But yeah, for learning those tactile skills and things, I think technology's not so flash at the moment, is it?
Are there any packages available that you could use to build, a very simple simulation? I mean, just with a few graphics and
Yep.
no animations or anything like that.
I guess there's different ways you can go. Tools like Second Life are really good for that, I'll be honest. They're a really good stepping stone to a new thing where you can go in as a novice sort of user and buy an existing hotel and drag that out onto the shores of a lake and add in a lot of the elements that you want before you bring in a designer and go, okay, here's what I want it to look like. There's other more simple game makers as well, like Game Maker is literally the name of the software by Yo-Yo Games, where you can go in and again, as a non-programmer with sort of drag and drop capabilities, and you could build something like this hotel game in there, most definitely. You can go in, you can design your own graphics, you sort of do your own basic coding using this drag and drop and put your game together from scratch and get an idea of how it's going to work, and they're free. So definitely, yeah, worth having a look at. Yeah.
I just wanted to know, with some people are developing like off-the-shelf packages, say to cater for some subjects or units. What would you say about that? Have you tried them or seen some of those around?
They're all different, so I wouldn't want to generalise. Yeah, some of them are fantastic. Like the Melbourne Uni one we just did, we're hoping will end up being one of those. A lot of the things we do are just freely available. Yeah, I couldn't comment generally.
So try it out and see how you go with it.
Oh, try it. Absolutely, for sure. There's some brilliant stuff out there. Like we spoke to a train company. What was it? I don't know, the people who are mechanics on trains or something. They're like, oh, wouldn't a train simulator be great? For any gamer in here knows that the best simulator you can possibly buy with your money in the world is a train simulator. It is extreme. They've got every model, everything. And I just pointed them at that going, look, oh wow. But yeah, some of the simulators that are already out there are just awesome. And they're not even necessarily educational. And that's where SimCity, Hotel Tycoon, all these other existing tools might already work for some of the lessons that you guys want to teach.
Anyway, I think we're out of time. Just want to let you know about a few things. Firstly, we're going to showcase the projects that Dell has been involved with in the Digital Aquarium, so on those devices there. So if you have time, please come back to have a play. The second thing is, I know that it sounds like you are all at different stages. Some of you have probably got some ideas, some of you haven't, but just you're interested. So our learning technologists are going to be supporting anybody who has a particular idea that they would like to progress. Maybe just kind of like bouncing your ideas off somebody and to see how we can actually build from that. So just let myself know if you do want to organise a time with any of the learning technologists here. And the third thing was I just wanted to let you know the next deep dive event that we've got is on the Internet of Things. So Cisco's presenting next week. So look out for the newsletter from LTU and as well as on the on-course newsletter. So I think that was all the announcements. So firstly, please thank Dale for presenting today.
This has been a Swinburne production.